Hello, I'm Steve McCaskill, editor at SportsPro, and I'm here at Sports Interactive HQ in East London. I'm joined by studio director Miles Jacobson.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining me. This is a wonderful place to be for me. I've been playing Football Manager and its predecessor for 25 years now. I remember playing or seeing even the Championship Manager magazine, which I think I had every issue of.
I love that mag. It was brilliant. And we were the first game to ever have their own magazine as well.
It was my first interaction with the original Championship Manager, and that was a bit of a culture shock for me. It was around the time of just before Championship Manager 4 after CMA 102, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to play the first Championship Manager. And it was a very different game. It shows how far things have come since.
We've definitely, that was, did that even have a 2D pitch at that point?
It did not, no.
No, it was just text only at that point.
Yeah.
So,
and compare that to the game that you've launched this week, Football Manager 2026. It's been a few decades of evolution. There's been many leaps forward. There's been iterative improvements, more significant. But it's fair to say this is the most significant advance in at least a generation, maybe ever for
I
the
think
series.
I think it's the biggest leap since we went from CM3 to CM4. It's that big because the UI, the user interface and user experience is so different with what we've done with the UI. And every other time that we've made a change, apart from when we went from Champman to Football Manager, which was obviously a name change thing as well, we've always, like, each version of the game is always kind of the previous one plus, whereas this really is, it's a sequel to what we've done before, and it's the first part of what will hopefully be a 20-year journey with this next part of the Football Manager series, rather than the 21st version of Football Manager. So it's both a very exciting time and quite a nervous time as well.
As a player of the series, kind of aware of what's being included in this. But for those who aren't as familiar with your games, tell us why this is such a big leap forward, why this is such a big deal for you as a company.
So from a technology perspective, we've used the same engine, and a game engine is basically the thing that runs it. If you've got a PC, then you've got Windows is kind of the engine behind that, right? But every game requires an engine. Every bit of software requires an engine to be able to run. And we'd used our own internal engine for the last 34 years. And we were struggling to keep up, really, with the modern day equivalent engines, and made a decision a few years ago that we were actually going to stop working on our own engine. Because if you can't beat them, join them, right? And there are a couple of engines that you can buy as a games maker. One of those is called Unity, and that's the engine that we've decided to work with. So with Unity, it actually works on a different programming language to the programming language that we're used to. We have ways of still writing things in the language called C++, and then it can get converted up. We are able to do things on the UI where we're doing them in a bit of software, and that gets converted up. But there's been a lot of work on what's known as data exposition, which is where we've taken the C++ code and exposed it to the C# area. So probably a little bit too technical there. But that engine has meant that we've had to rethink everything, the engine change. And certainly when it comes to the user interface as well, we've started from the ground up on that to come up with something that we think is a great modern user interface. The benefit for the consumer with these changes is really the game's a lot prettier. The graphics and the match engine are a different level to where we had them before, and the animations as well are just a huge leap forward. So there's benefits for everyone in the mix, but it's been very complicated getting here. It's been a difficult path, and just delighted now that people can actually play the game.
Why did you feel it was necessary to make that jump? I mean, Football Manager players, they don't want it to, just be black and white, but they're very there's core group of people who just want, they're very happy to look at statistics, very happy to look at a 2D match engine. Why do you feel it's necessary to make that jump to something more advanced graphically, for example?
Honestly, I think that with FM 22, 23, 24, it was starting to get a little bit stale, what we were doing. And there were lots of things that we wanted to do to try and break through that barrier. And our engine wasn't capable of it. And the decision that we had to make was, do we bring in lots and lots and lots of people to work on improving our engine and taking it up to the next level? And it's a market where you can't really compete with the likes of Unreal and Unity when it comes to hiring people, because why would someone want to work on an engine that's going to power one game when they can work on an engine that's going to power hundreds, if not thousands, of games and films and other things? So it was a bit of a, if you can't beat them, join them element, because we just couldn't compete with what they were able to do and the speed that they're able to do it.
Now, the sports video games are probably the last genre that adhere to an annual development and release cycle because of it's because of the seasonal nature of sport. Now, you talk about this being a challenging process, and of course that there was a delay to it. Football Manager 2025 wasn't released because of the scale of the project.
Well, it wasn't released because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah,
we the changes that we made to the user interface and the user experience actually made it harder to play. You couldn't find anything in game. We tried to be too clever with it, so we cancelled the game because I wasn't prepared for people to go out and spend their hard-earned money on something that we thought was rubbish. So thankfully we fixed that in the last 12 months to have something that's great.
And we're talking a bit about how Sports Interact's become a partner for the footballing world and how you work with clubs and leagues. But obviously, there's how did your partners react to that news?
Some were more supportive than others, but at the end of the day, none of our partners wanted a rubbish game out there. And when I say rubbish, that's rubbish to our standards, maybe not rubbish to everyone else's standards, but it just wasn't good enough. So, they weren't the easiest conversations to have with all of the partners, because it's not just about the football partners, it's also about the technology partners. It's about the subscription platforms that we're on, because we're on Netflix, we're on Apple Arcade, we're on Game Pass. And yeah, there was a lot of explaining to do and a lot of mea culpa, but I took full responsibility for the fact that it wasn't good enough, and I'd made the decision with the support of Sega, our parent company. And if someone who is working on the game directly, in myself, it's the person that's making that decision, and they're sitting down there with one of these huge companies and going, the reason I've pulled the game is because your consumers wouldn't enjoy it. It's quite an understandable message. So even though, there was a big financial element to it, I think everyone understood because no one wants something rubbish out there.
If we talk about the game now, and you made all you had opportunity to put it right, put something you're proud about out on the market, and there are some really quite noteworthy additions, and for us, is the addition of women's football, perhaps being the one of the headline. I'm not going to call it improvement because it's an entirely tiny thing. Now, before it was suggested that adding women's game wouldn't have been commercially viable or would have been feasible. What was the thinking behind adding the world of women's football to the game? Was it because you saw a commercial opportunity, or because it was something you thought would add to the game, or something you just felt was the right thing to do? Why did you do it, and what was the scale of adding that to the game?
So I was speaking at a conference where I sat there and said that it wasn't commercially viable. And when I came off stage at that conference, 3 of the Lionesses came up to me, sat me down and said, it's never going to be commercially viable unless people like you actually help us push through the glass ceiling. And they were absolutely spot on. So we started working on it or came up with plans to work on it and ran some numbers. And at that point, the numbers still didn't make sense, but they make more sense now that we're actually delivering it a few years down the line. So I think the reasons that we added it are, one, it's football. And we have lots of leagues inside our game that aren't commercially viable when you look at them in that raw format, but the game is the sum of all of its parts. So we looked at how women's football was growing, and I think, from our perspective, it's definitely become a lot stronger commercially now than it was back then. I think there's still a lot of room for growth, in the same way as there's a lot of room for growth for many of the other leagues that are inside the game. But for us, it's really about consumer choice. Our games are played for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of hours on average by people. And everyone always wants more to do. So we've added more men's leagues this year. We've also added 11 countries' leagues on the women's side of things, most of which are licensed, so that we can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and also give all of our players more choice when they are playing the game, and hopefully be part of the journey and accelerate the journey for women's football to be even more and more popular. I mean, on the international stage, it's popular as the men's game in a lot of ways, in a lot of countries. League-wise, there's still a way to go, but I think we'll get there.
As you know, Football Manager has had a very strong impact on fandom, whether it's awareness of global football, whether it's how we talk about tactics and statistics. It's made that very mainstream and very, very cool in a way, even before data was cool, where people talk about it in Football Manager. And do you think having women's football in Football Manager can have that impact on the women's game in terms of how people talk about it and understand it more, because they might be playing managing a women's team and understanding more about the players, understanding more about the various transfer regulations or competition structures? Is that something you think could happen?
So I don't think I can be the person that judges that. I'm told by women's footballers and people who work in women's football that is the effect that it's going to have, and I hope that they are right. But I still find it, odd's the wrong word, it kind of freaks me out a bit, the effect that the game has had on the football world, right? When Ov and Paul Collier first started working on this game in their bedroom in Shropshire, they weren't expecting it was still going to be going now. When I first got involved a few years after they started it all off, they met me and I became involved as well. Didn't think that we would grow to the size that we have. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm a short bloke from Watford who makes a game for himself, and it just so happens there's a few million people who like it out there, and football clubs have started using it. It's massive props to all of our researchers around the world, our research team here, the business development team who works so closely with clubs. But there are now, on the men's side, or in fact, with some cases it's men's and women's side, but there's 40 clubs now who license our database from us to be part of their scouting network, which is one of those life imitating art things ad infinitum. So I know that you've played the game for a long time, right? So we have a meeting room here that I call the data errors room, but everyone else calls the legends room, which is the players that we got wrong over the years. If we can make anyone or help anyone become a household name off the back of the game, then we're winning, really, with what we're doing. So whether that be a male player or a female player, as long as we're getting it right. If people can learn about someone when they're 16 and becomes a world superstar when they're 26, we've been known for doing that for a very, very long time, and I would love that to be the case on the women's side as well.
Yeah, there's a rich cultural tapestry of players who are fantastic in game and haven't quite lived up to the superstar status they have digitally.
Not for a while.
Not for a while.
So we have a lot more checks and balances in place now, and our strike rate's a lot higher. But I also want to say on that last question, and I'm being asked about women's football a lot, and that's great, that it's just football. For us, this is about expanding our football universe. It's not really about making a statement. It's not about doing something that deserves a pat on the back, because it's quite the opposite, right? We were part of the problem. We were too late to the party on this. So it's great that we're doing it now, but inside the studio, it's one game, it's one sport, it's football.
A good time to talk about the database in general. I mean, how do you feel when you see people within football citing the database? I know you have deals with data providers, you have deals with clubs. So how does that? How do you feel that people using it, you're working that way? And how do you feel when you see professional scouting tools that look an awful lot like Football Manager?
I think we've inspired quite a lot of people in the space. So as long as they're not stealing our data, and some of them have done in the past, but as long as they're not stealing our data, I'm fine with that. I mean, it's the biggest compliment that we can be paid, because if people in football understand the look of our game to the point that someone else is ripping it off for their tool, we must be doing something right. We love the fact that so many people who work in football play the game, because we can use that to get feedback from them to help make the game better. And it's a very important part of what we do, the relationships that we have with clubs, the people that we're able to bring in. If you look at the new tactics module inside FM26 with possession and out of possession formations as well as instructions, that came about because we were asking managers at the super high level to show us their team talks that they give to players regarding tactics. And all of them were showing two different formations. And it's like, well, we probably need to do that as well. So whilst we have helped on the data side of things over the years and help popularize the data side of things inside football, we also get help from the football world to help make our game better for all of our consumers. So it's a symbiotic relationship. I believe that's the right word. Is it?
It is the right.
Is it? You're the journalist. I'm the idiot from Watford. So
you can say whatever you like about me, but I don't mind being called a journalist. Let's talk licensing and how that's become a bigger factor in the game. I mean, we very briefly mentioned the original Championship Manager, which didn't have player names for
the first version. Yeah,
sorry, the very first version.
Very first one had no player names.
It was added over time, and then real players were named, but there weren't. There was no sort of formal relationship with leagues and clubs beyond, I guess, what you get with the FIFA Pro license for player names.
We didn't even have a FIFA Pro license back then, and the Champman days. I think it's fair to say that football licensing has grown up quite a lot because of video games, not before video games.
I think that's definitely fair when you look at the other big title in the industry. They almost...
you can talk about them with friends.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, they effectively created image rights. That's how impactful this has
absolutely
this has been. But we've seen a slew of agreements in past decade and a bit with leagues and with federations and competitions. There was UEFA, the other club competitions. This is the first game in the series to have the Premier League involved. So why has that become more of a thing? What do these official partnerships give you? What do they give the properties in question? Why has that become important when perhaps it may not have been in the past?
So I think since we've had player pictures in the game, it's become more important for the consumer. I think it's brilliant to be able to be giving back to football as well, rather than using the law to be very careful about what we were doing. We'd much rather be working with people, working with the Premier League. I think the reach for the Premier League announcement on Football Manager was the biggest reach that we've ever had on a trailer that we've ever done, right? Because we're able to work with the league, we're able to work with the clubs. I was looking through the trailer and I'm having to pause it because of the amount of talent in there. It's just absolutely bonkers. And these licenses give us the possibilities to work with players in that way. So it makes it more authentic for the consumer that's playing the game. And with something like the Premier League, you spoke about EA earlier and EAFC. They have an exclusive license with the Premier League, but we don't see each other as rivals. We're friends. I think, we enjoy playing EAFC, they enjoy playing Football Manager. So they've actually carved us out of that. So they are the official football game. We're the official football management game of the Premier League. And that's how we've been able to get all the women's licenses as well, which EA had exclusives on. Where they had exclusives, they were prepared to carve us out so that we were able to get those licenses as well. So it's a good way of... we're not necessarily working together, but we're not stopping each other from being able to work. So it's brilliant. We're working with more leagues, more licenses, more clubs. We actually believe we picked up a deal this morning, and now got to work out how we get it in the game in time for launch, because we're doing this interview just before launch. But long may it continue. We want to be as authentic as possible.
You have your sphere of influence. I think it's fair to say, and that's one thing I've seen recently in license agreements. It's no longer the totality of one going to one company, because there's different routes, different channels of engagement.
Yeah, I personally hate exclusive licenses, and we try not to do them. I think it needs to be the consumer who chooses the product that they're playing, but that's just a personal opinion.
I mean, as a consumer, I would agree with that, and it is something I think has been recognised with the industry that it's not the most efficient way. And to that end, I mean, how do the organisation see you as a channel for engagement? Because you have a very engaged, very loyal fan base that spend, as you say, hundreds of hours in this game. That's an opportunity to reach these fans, or at least get them with their intellectual property. So, I mean, is that a view share that they do see you as a channel engagement, not just a revenue generating exercise?
Well, as part of the authenticity that I speak about, we also try to make the club as authentic as possible. So even though we don't have real stadiums inside the game, we have advertising holdings, and we are using the adverts from the partners, from the sponsors, where they provide them to us. So that is definitely of commercial benefit to those clubs and to those partners, because the eyeballs that are seeing them the whole time are, as you rightly say, huge. I mean, we've got 2 million unique players every month. There were over 20 million people who played FM24, and the average playtime on the PC game is 550 hours. So that's a lot of time spent playing the game and looking at this stuff. There are definitely benefits for both sides. I think some leagues and clubs get that. Some leagues and clubs don't. But it's always funny when we get partnership proposals from football clubs and they list in there the media value of being in Football Manager for their club when they're pitching to us. We're like, maybe you should have thought about that a little bit more. But the clubs that are doing that are the smart clubs, and the ones that just go, yeah, whatever, they're the people that should be doing it, because being an FM and being an EAFC is brilliant for any brand.
It's interesting you're able to get those metrics quite easily because of the modern nature of game platforms, being on, if you're being on Xbox, being on Steam, being on etc. You can get a lot of that data as to how fans are using it, I suppose. Yeah,
on every platform bar one that we're on, we can get whatever data. So, and that helps us design the game. I have a dashboard that has key data on it. We also have a business intelligence team here that I can turn around to and ask the most ridiculous questions, and they can find the answers to, including things like how many times have people pressed this button in game, and if they have pressed that button in game, how many times have they pressed it more than once, to get rid of the mistakes. And we use all of that data to decide what we're working on in game. So there were a bunch of debates about things when it came to FM26, because it's a new game rather than 20 years of games altogether. We had to make some difficult decisions about some features that we probably want in the game, but were going to be very expensive time-wise, and the decisions on those were all based on how many people have pressed that button, how many people actually use it. So we know that some people will miss certain features that may come back at points in the future, but we also know how many people will miss that feature.
One game is something wouldn't have been possible, even 10, 15 years ago.
It's brilliant for solving arguments. Because a lot of game design is done by gut. And gut is a very simple thing to argue about, because two people can have completely different gut reactions to something. Having the data to back it up kind of stops those arguments in their tracks.
And you touched on it before about the relationships with Netflix and Apple Arcade. You have 3 tiers of Football Manager. You have I would call it the full
tiers
of console as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so we have Football Manager Console, Football Manager Touch, and Football Manager Mobile.
And why did you decide to partner with Netflix and Apple Arcade, and what was the benefit of doing that for you as a business?
So in both cases, they were games that we were deciding whether we were going to continue making or not. And in both cases, a very large organization came up to us and said, if you were ever thinking about changing a business model on that, we'd be really interested. So that was kind of the starting point. But this could be quite a long answer. I used to work in the music industry a long time ago. When I first started at Sports Interactive, for the first few years I was at Sports Interactive, I did both. And I saw the music industry making mistakes in the 90s when it came to music being shared on computers in universities that then became these illegal networks down the line. And they ignored it, because I actually did have a fax at home for a long time until it carbonized over, that said, we're not worried about this because it requires the internet and we don't think the internet's going to catch on. So we saw those mistakes being made. And then throughout the next decades, Netflix came along and disrupted the film industry in the same way. And the film industry sat there and went, you're evil. And then, okay, you're now the only option, so let's work with you. When we first started hearing about what Google were planning to do with Stadia and what Microsoft were trying to do with Game Pass, I decided that we should embrace them and set up a bus that got a lot of people on that bus internally and at Sega side. And we're not going to see this as a problem. We're going to see this as an opportunity. And by taking that opportunity of working with partners like Netflix, like Apple, like Microsoft, like Sony, and Epic as well with their free game weeks, we've changed our business model. So 5 years ago, we had 2 million players. Now we have 20 million players on FM24. Now, we're not making 10 times the revenue because that's not how these models work, but we're doing pretty well out of it. And if you were to go in and talk to some of our new licensing partners, one of the reasons that I expect they'll give you is their reach is way bigger. So therefore, we wanted to work with them. And they're right, it is. So it's kind of helped us. It's helped us get to more people. It's helped us to entertain more people. And it's paying for itself and more. So for a game like ours, it works really well. It won't work for some kinds of games. It won't work for a game that is a 8 to 10 hour adventure game and you're done, right? Because there's no replayability factor in it. But for us, we're seeing a lot of people trying the game for the first time. We're seeing a lot of people fall in love with the game for the first time. And we're seeing people playing it throughout the year on those platforms. So therefore the platforms are happy because they want to retain as many consumers as they can. And if there's product on their platform that makes people want to come back, then that's a pretty good way to retain them. So it's worked really, really, really well for us. We've got a much bigger audience. It's kind of scary though. Like the anticipation that we've had for FM26 this year in the run up has been like nothing I've ever experienced. The pressure that puts on is huge as well. But we're incredibly lucky to be in this position. So yeah, just enjoying it.
Another thing that's happened recently, I mean, again, I'm not going to fill this with anecdotes about how I used to play the game, but, trying to get a network game was it could be a challenge, in the early days, just with technological limits. Yeah. Now there's moves, Football Manager's entering the world of esports, and it's partnered with FIFA on that. There's other competitions. How do you view esports as an organisation, and what is the relationship with FIFA?
My things about esports have changed massively in the last couple of years. I don't play games where you shoot people, right? It's not something that I want to do in my life. So I don't play those games. I respect the people that make them, and they look incredible, and I will watch other people playing them. It's just not something that I want to do. And those games have obviously done well as esports, as has Fortnite, as has EAFC. I didn't see a place for Football Manager in that. Football Manager tends to be a game that you play single player. The majority of our players play it single player and play it for very long times. So when we started working with FIFA E on the Football Manager World Cup, they came to us and said, we can make this work. And I went, ho. Never going to happen, but why not? Let's give it a chance. Then when I was at the first tournament, when I was at the final, when it was all finished, I went and spoke to the crew. And I got pretty emotional during the final. I was very glad that the camera wasn't on me for the whole time, because I'm not the most emotional of people in the world. And there I was holding back a couple of tears. I just went up to the crew at the end and said, I thanked them, obviously, and said, what you've managed to do today is take a single player experience, a lonely experience, and turn it into something that was like watching a sport on TV. And I realised at that point that Football Manager can be played in a competitive way, and that it can also be really, really exciting to watch, even without the personalities that some of our streamers have, where people tend to be watching the game because of the personality more sometimes than the game itself. So I'm now a big believer in esports.
In the past, Sports Interactive, that you partnered with some other sporting projects like Out of the Park Baseball, when you signed Hockey Manager. Do you have any desire to create a game that isn't involved with football? Is there something you'd like to take on, even as a hypothetical?
Not this week. It changes at times. There are other sports that we would like to make games for, but it's not necessarily possible in some of them. But at the moment, we've got our work cut out to keep entertaining our 20 million consumers with our games, and FM26 is out there. Or, by the time the interview goes out, is out there. I think we want to sleep a little bit first and then start working on the next game before we start thinking about other sports. 4 games a year is enough, surely, for one studio to be making.
On that note, I think maybe it's time, the game's out there, get yourself some sleep. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us.
Thank you.